And if you listen to their stories, you will never find the truth.
Find the truth.
And if you read what they are writing, you find your neck inside a noose.
Welcome to Extreme Brains, the podcast that embraces the chaos of a world gone wild. I'm David Evanoff, along with my fellow brainers and chaos enthusiasts, Sam Goldstein and James Woods. We are broadcasting to you from the semi-luxurious Evanoff Studios, located on the west side of the over-industrialized haven of South Salt Lake City, Utah. South Salt Lake City, Utah, the only place you can be south and west at the same time. Each week we'll dive headfirst into the absurdities of modern life, sharing sharp critiques, unfiltered humor, and just the right amount of existential dread. Our tagline, 3 voices, 1 mic, in a world gone wild. Sam, what are we talking about today?
Well, David, since this is the first episode of Extreme Brains, I think we should devote the entire episode to talking about the brain. What is the brain? Why do we need a brain? And would we be better off if we had just a dog's brain? But let me start with a little riddle for you guys. James, do you want to introduce yourself for a moment there?
Yeah, Walter James. All the really good people call me James.
We found James just up the street busking.
Yeah.
He's got a great voice, plays a nice guitar, although he makes up his own chords and nobody else can play them. And we
Smart,
decided
I say.
we decided it would be good to have him here with us today. So here's the riddle for you guys. What part of your body can travel 268 miles per second? Doot, 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 doot. Well, I'll tell you, since both of you guys look completely perplexed, I'll tell you what it is. It's one brain cell talking to another. 268 or 63 or something like that miles per second. That a little bit of electricity goes from one brain cell to another. So we're going to start this morning with a little overview of, what is the brain and why do we need a brain. But one of the things I like about the brain, I like a lot of things about the brain. You guys should know I've devoted myself to the brain, my career, not the physical brain, but the mental, the mind. Where is your mind? Why do we have a mind? Imagine it was a million years ago and we're sitting in a cave and we're secure and safe and we've just eaten and the rest of the guys are just happy to be there because they don't have a mind. And I'm the only guy with a mind. And I'm looking around thinking, why am I here? What's the meaning of life? And therein lies, the advent of the human condition. Because without a brain, the human condition is about the equivalent of a dog's life. And with a brain, it becomes a whole lot more complicated. But I was going to say, one of the things I like about the brain is that size doesn't equal performance. And there are other
I've heard
that
that
of your
before,
body.
yeah, about other things, yeah.
Right? Haven't you had that experience, James?
Not personally.
Of course not. No, well.
But I've had some friends that
Look
had
at the
that
big
problem.
brain on
Yeah.
James.
You know what they say.
Yeah,
The
but
bigger
isn't
the
that
brain.
interesting? You say, if your feet are big, then other appendages might be big, or if you have a big head, or whatever the case may be. But the brain is one of those organs where size doesn't matter. And in fact, Einstein didn't have the biggest brain. He had a fairly ordinary-sized brain. And this is, again, one of these great mysteries of life, this idea of awareness, because I think I can explain through evolution almost everything about the brain. But you can't explain the mind. How do you have half a mind? So evolution requires a step-by-step change. So it's a great change to have a mutation in which suddenly you're aware that you exist.
Oh.
Right? You have a young daughter.
Mm-hmm.
She's now how old?
She's 2.
And when she looks in the mirror, what does she see?
Now she sees herself. That's Evie.
And she knows, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to have Evie on the podcast one day to teach us about life. But there's that self-awareness that, very few of our species have.
When does that kick in? would you estimate?
Probably 18 months to 2 years. Kids look around and they know. And at some point we can talk about instincts, but babies, our babies are born completely helpless, right? They're not salmon and snakes that are born with enough instinct to survive. They're not bear cubs that need a year with mama to kind of hone their instincts. They're not higher primates like gorillas where, everybody raises the offspring. I love the one image of the baby gorillas jumping on the big gorilla, and he finally has enough, and he takes the baby and he throws him across the savannah, and the baby rolls and jumps up and runs back, and nobody calls the Division of Family Services. Nobody files a complaint, right? And then you come to our species, right, where our children don't grow up until they're 40 nowadays. They're right? They're still living at home, but at least 10 or 15 in most religions. What you find in most religions is there's a point at which you become a man, right? What is it in the Catholic? How old do you have to be in the Catholic religion before they say you get communion and you're a man?
Confirmed.
Confirmed?
Teenage
8,
years.
right?
Yeah. You can.
Or am I confusing my...
How old is it when you're LDS? Till 10 or something?
8 is
8?
your... Yeah.
Yeah, and you get that little ring, right? Choose the right. And in the Jews, it's 13.
Is that when you get the ring? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so every religion has a transition point where they say you're now responsible for yourself. It's now between you and God. Your parents they're not going to take the flack for you anymore, right? So, but if you look worldwide on the streets, there are millions of children 10 and over who survive. Under 10, it's hard. So you need at least 10, 12 years with somebody taking care of you, right? And so, again, let's go back in time and imagine it's 50,000 years ago. And again, we're warm and safe. And we've got 3, in our little family group, we've got 3 women who've had babies, and they're clutching the babies. And there's no diapers, and there's no deodorants, and the babies stink, and the mothers stink, and the wolves are outside going, something's in there.
Yeah.
Right. So why didn't we just throw the babies out and let the wolves have them and get on with it? Did we really know that those babies are our future? See the world through the eyes of children, see the future? I don't think we knew that, but instinctually, there's a little right spot in the front of your brain, size of a pea, lights up when you see a baby. Within 1/7 of a second. We love baby kittens, baby puppies, babies with craniofacial disorders. Somehow they look cute. Because there's a part in our brain that just says babies are cute, you should take care of them. And the baby has a social smile, and the baby can recognize mothers' faces more than males' faces, females versus males. It's a problem children with autism have. They don't make that early distinction. They look at lights instead. The ears of young babies are set within the range of women's voices. They listen to women's voices,
Makes
right?
sense.
They orient, right? Doesn't it make sense? Because that's who's going to take care of them. So evolution has built in this system where babies engage us and we take care of them. And oh, by the way, I'm starting a business. I'm hoping you 2 guys are going to come on to Salesforce. Rent a baby. And if you have any conflict, whether it's a divorce mediation, a business negotiation, I've reached out to President Trump. He's got a lot of challenges he's going to have to deal with, and we're going to bring babies. And everybody has to hold a baby, preferably a non-crying, irritable baby. But everybody has to hold a baby, and if we want to skew the results of the outcome, then we give the crying baby to the guy we want to lose the negotiation, and the baby will scream and yell, and he'll resolve the conflict to get rid of the baby. And anyway, that's one of my better ideas.
On a side note.
Yeah, I've never thought of a return policy on a baby.
On a side note. And one last thing about the brain. Think about this, because you and I were just discussing this. What were you telling me about an early storage unit for a computer?
Oh, yeah. We were talking about hard drives. And, I've seen the old pictures of them loading like a 256K computer into an airplane, and it was like the size of a car.
Sure.
And now that can fit in the size of ballpoint pen.
And do you have any idea how they do that? I mean, I think sometimes I look at certain things and I think, that's the devil. That's the devil. Somebody made a deal with the devil. How is it? How is that possible that what used to be, I'd buy a little jump drive, it was $256, and everybody thought that was amazing.
Yeah, you'll never use that much
And now
data.
I've got a little 2 terabyte jump drive. Help me understand where they put that stuff. I mean, you can only put so many clowns in a Volkswagen.
Right.
So how do they kiss stuff more? Oh, look, the average Volkswagen holds 18 clowns, but we have a Volkswagen that holds 47. And then the guy across the street says, no, I invented a new Volkswagen. We compress them into a zip clown, and they hold 227 clowns. I mean, do you know, David?
Well, I mean, it's constantly been tech's adventure, and I read about it all the time. They're working with nanotechnology right now to put data in the size of a hair.
And nano means small.
Yeah. So we will save essentially those 2 terabyte gigs on something the size of a human hair. Now, is that important?
Well, I don't know. Does it take?
know,
It
but I'm
takes a
gonna
lot of
lose it.
energy.
Right now, that's the problem. But once they work out that energy use, the size is what confuses me. Why do we need something so small?
Well, look at cell phones. I had a brick, and I got to get smaller. I got smaller and smaller and smaller. Then I had a tiny little cell phone. Although I watched some YouTube the other day that my grandson pulled up, and this guy was buying miniature technology, anything that was really small, and he bought a couple of cell phones that were like an inch by a half an inch, and they actually worked, right? Sure. And now we went from bigger to smaller, and now bigger again, right? We have bigger,
Slowly getting bigger.
slowly
yeah.
because people want to watch things,
Yeah.
and not just make a call, right? And so it's an interesting phenomenon, this idea of limitless storage, because you know what the brain does. The brain it starts kind of as a tube when in immediate conception. I don't know if you guys know this, and the brain cells, the stem cells as we call them, the generic guys. Imagine if you could be anybody you wanted to be by just standing next to them. Remember that Woody Allen movie, Zelig?
Sure.
Anybody you stood next to, he became them, right? But the stem cells migrate out of the tube, and they build the brain over mostly the first 3 or 4 months. So the first 3 or 4 months is a bad time for mothers to get drunk or do other things, because what happens to the stem cells is they get drunk, and then they wander around, and who knows where they end up, but not where they're supposed to be. And the brain doesn't have a construction supervisor. So the next day after the bender, the brain doesn't have a way of going back to see if those stem cells went to the right place. And what you get, it's very interesting, what you get are little tangles of cells called ectopias, and you can't see them with a naked eye. You can't see them on an MR. You have to slice up a dead brain and stain it and look at it. And all of us have 100 to 200, 300 ectopias in our brains. Just normal. I mean, when you have 80 to 100 billion cells trying to migrate from a tube and build on each other, I mean, 50 minions would be a problem. Imagine if you had 80 billion minions. So you get this building. So people who abuse substances, when they pass away at Harvard, they have a brain bank, and people who pass away and they donate their brains, these people have thousands of ectopias. Thousands of little tangles that disrupt the roadways and the pathways. Again, 80 billion or so cells, and every cell is hardwired to up to 50,000 others. And it hardwires it into a synapse where thousands of cells have nerve endings, so they can talk to each other at the same time. So we've got 80 to 100 billion cells. Every cell has 50,000 connections, and at any given millisecond, any cell is talking to up to 5,000 other cells. Sure. And it has 2 simple conversations. It either says turn on or turn off. That's that neural network. But it's not a computer, which is hence the unlimited storage. Although I question that idea of unlimited storage, because at my age, in order to remember something, I have to forget something. I have to consciously sit down. I want to learn something new. What am I going to forget to make room for
Your hard
what
drive's full. You got to.
My hard drive is full.
Is that physical? Is that part of brain and age?
Well, and it is part of aging, right? Mm-hmm. But what's interesting about it is we're all different ages. I'll give it away. I'm 72. You're 60 now.
61.
61.
52.
52. If we had someone who was 40 and 30 and 20 in the room, and we asked them to talk about the last 2 weeks of their life, we all have the same level of memory for the past weeks. And again, from an evolutionary basis, the body has a planned obsolescence. We should have our children and get out of the way and die. But we live on and crowd the world, right? And so when you think about that, I don't know that evolution really has a way, has had the time to help brains continue functioning after you're 60 or 70 or 80. You get this, it deteriorates. We don't know how to do it. Later, we may talk about how I think we could do it. But and so we compress old memories, almost like a computer compressing. Right. But I still don't think it's a good analogy. We zip file. And so my last 2 weeks of memory is no different than yours or somebody who's 20. Even my last month or 2 months or 2 years or 5 years. But my memories from 60 years ago have been terribly compressed. I'm doing an experiment on myself, and listeners can try it yourself. I've taken photographs throughout my whole life, from when I was a kid that I scanned on, and I must have 6 or 7,000, and I put them on my desktop screensaver. And if I'm not doing anything on my computer, my screensaver comes on in a minute, and it begins to cycle these photos, and it repeats them 2 or 3 times, and then picks another one and picks another one. I change my desktop photo every 5 minutes, which is the quickest you could do it. And what I'm thinking is, I see these pictures as I'm working, and it reminds me, I remember being in Paris when I was 25. I remember. And sometimes I have to look at the picture. Where the hell did I take? Where's that picture from?
Sure.
Right? But I think the use it or lose it, I think it brings back that memory, which brings it more forward, takes it out of storage. It's almost as if you go into the storage room and say, let's take out that trip we took to Zion's 25 years ago, and let's examine it for a while, and then we'll put it back. But once we take it out and examine it, we've put it into the more foreground of our memory. And I wonder if that's a simple activity like that is a cognitive way of enhancing people's memories. I haven't tested it, but I try it. Look at old photographs and you remember.
I was just recently reading about people with that kind of random access memory that can instantly recall any time or date.
Right.
Is that neurodivergent? Or is that, or am I?
We're going to open the neurodivergent can. How much more time do we have in this segment?
Well, as we talk about memory, I thought that was fascinating. There are people, an actress, a famous actress.
Yeah, Mary Lou Henner.
Mary Lou Henner.
Yeah, Mary Lou Henner. But let's go back one step. And I started working on a book called Extreme Brains, which is how we came about this podcast, in which I'm writing biographies of people with extreme brains, including the autistic young man, Kim, who since passed away, that I worked with, who could tell you any baseball statistic from 100 years on, anything, who pitched, who did this, who did that. Couldn't tell you anything else. Didn't know anything about football or anything else, but that, he could retain that. And we don't really have an explanation. So my theory in this book, in writing these biographies, and not all these people are autistic. Some people are just pretty normal, but they have this capacity, like Mary Lou Henner, right? Yeah. And my premise is, rather than looking at them as outliers and considering that this is not the devil or God at work in a sense, this is a physical organ that's able to do this, why can't all brains do it? Because each brain is unique. Believe it or not, if you look at, so let's go back to the tube thing. So the cells build up, right? And you get these little ectopias, and eventually you build a brain. Okay. As the brain gets built, it could be smooth as a ball. But no, it starts to fold in on itself to make more surface area. All the folds of the brain, look at our logo, create lots more surface area, which creates a more functional area for the brain. Now, that's an interesting adaptation, and those of you that think God made the brain will say, see, God figured that out. None of us could figure that out. Or how did evolution figure it out? How was there a mutation that said in one brain, well, let's start folding and see if that enhances our survival? Who knows? But it starts to fold, right? And because of that, brains are like fingerprints. No two brains, even in identical twins, are exactly the same in their
They all fold
folds,
different.
in their folds, and nobody talks about that. And maybe someday they'll have instead of your fingerprint or your eye print, when AI figures out how to forge that kind of stuff. You see Mission Impossible, and he takes a fingerprint and pulls it off on a piece of tape and puts it on his finger, or he takes an eye, or in the more extreme movies where this is terrible, but they cut the guy's eye out. Remember that James Bond movie?
Sure.
And they put the eye against the scanner. Well, they can't cut your brain out. Someday there'll be a scanner, you'll stand under it, and it'll send these UV waves or laser waves or whatever the hell into your brain, and it'll take a fingerprint of your brain, right? So the brain is this kind of interesting organ, I think. Let me ask you guys a question. Why do we need a brain?
Well, on a basic level, it's the commander-in-chief, right? It's running the physical organs of our body.
That's the back of the brain. I don't need the front of the brain to do that.
Oh.
Why did evolution not stop at the primitive brain, the what we call the id, the brain that's only designed to keep you alive, breathing, etc., and that part of the brain will do anything to stay alive. The id. Why? And there's been this war between the front of the brain and the back of the brain. But okay, so keep going. I cut you off.
Then I would say that was evolutionary in surviving with other Homo sapiens or Cro-Magnons, or as human developed. The ability to rationalize or communicate via music, via pounding on a rock, early communication. That was the evolution of that part of the brain. That would be my speculation as
I think
as
you've
a
been
lame
watching
musician.
too much of you've been listening too much to Hal. Remember Hal?
I do.
Hal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think, James? We just picked you up in the street. What do you think?
I would say the same thing as Dave. I just think of it musically, of course. Just to exist with using the back of your brain wouldn't allow you to write a great song.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a good point.
I think there are some songs that are written from the back of people's brains.
Well, I've heard
but-
some songs like that too. I've probably written a few.
Yeah. Well,
So tell
Consi-
us, brain
well, but-
scientist.
but consider that we're talking about evolution of a brain from earliest organisms, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know, we study rats. People get upset because in some research areas they study bunny rabbits, or I don't find anybody getting upset when they study dogs, but nobody gets upset with studying rats. Nobody really likes rats. And it's fortunate for us because the rat's brain chemistry is very similar to ours. And we and the rats go back about 30 or 40 million years, maybe more. As I sit here, I don't recall. But we're a very close relative to the rat. One of the first little organisms when dinosaurs were probably still around to crawl around and on four legs, and everything else evolved from that organism. But rats have nervous systems that are very similar to ours, and that's why we study them with drug studies, etc., because they'll respond the way we do, typically. So, and I'll give you an example of that, right? So they want to decide how to schedule drugs. It could be addicting, right? We have a 5-schedule system in the U.S.
Right.
And they take a drug like Adderall, and they give the rats access to it. And the rats will just keep taking the Adderall. They won't eat. They won't until they die. So they say, "Oh boy, this is dangerous." Right. Well, Then they take another drug, for example, Wellbutrin, that's sometimes used for ADHD, and they give it to the rat, and the rat will eat a little Wellbutrin and eat a little food, take a drink, eat a little Wellbutrin. So they say, oh, it's not as dangerous. It's not as addictive. From the rats, they do that study from the rats. So the rats' brains are very similar to ours. But consider the earliest organisms. I mean, these gigantic dinosaurs had brains the size of your fist, right? Mostly hind brains, back brains. And the brain is, I think, the equivalent of a 6 billion year construction project in which old is built on new. Or excuse me, new is built on old. I apologize. Which new is built on old, like the city of London, right? Just put another street in, cover the street that's there. Doesn't really matter. But it does matter because one of the reasons I don't think God created the brain is how poorly constructed it is. Yes, it's wonderfully creative. It's amazing. Where's your mind? Why do we have a mind? Etc. But information coming into your senses has to go so many different places before it comes out in a word, in an action, etc. It's not modular. It's not efficient. It's new built on old without taking the old out of service. For example, some people sneeze in bright light. Just happens that the circuit for sneezing and the response to bright light lies pretty close to each other in the brain. And for people who it's really close, when they're in bright light, they sneeze. I mean, it's all this strange kind of...
Or my pals that hear colors.
Correct.
Yeah.
Perfect pitch.
Well, they hear and they actually they hear, but they see.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very interesting phenomenon. And again, think of an 80 billion part machine. How many things could go wrong? How many things could be different? I mean, the diversity of our genetics is why we're here. And as you mentioned, the Neanderthals, Cro-Magnons, the dozens of other human-like species that walked this earth 1 million years ago are gone. We developed language, and language allows us to think one thing and say something else. Consider that. No other species can do that. We're the only ones that can think one and say something else. Remember that movie with Ricky Gervais where he was the only person who could lie in a world in which nobody lied. And he goes in the bank and he's got no money in his bank account and he says to the teller, "You made a mistake. I had $1,000 in my account." And she was like, "Oh, okay, here's the $1,000." And before you know it, he was godlike. He was pretty. And to me, that what that movie demonstrated was the true value of untruth in our society. That untruth can end up making you a god. Right? It's kind of an interesting idea.
What percentage, you always hear people saying, we only use so much percentage of our brain. What percentage of the brain do we actually use?
Is that even a question?
Yeah. Is that even a thing?
Well, let's start with the brain is 2% of the body, uses 20% of the energy. How do you like that? So 20% of the carbohydrates you take in.
Sugar.
Sugars. 20% of the oxygen you breathe goes to the brain. So it is like the energy needs of AI. That's a lot of energy. Well, because it's 80 billion brain cells firing, millions of times in a minute. It uses energy, needs a lot of energy. In some professionals' minds, if you measure energy consumption in the brain through what's called a SPECT scan, you breathe in irradiated oxygen or glucose. It doesn't hurt you, but it's not necessarily something to do every day. And then the computer looks at where that goes in your brain, and the software makes a picture of your brain. It's called a SPECT scan. And they use different colors to denote where the energy is going. It's a kind of very interesting technology. Danny Amen, a man that I've known a long time, is very popular because he uses SPECT scans because he believes that if you're a cardiologist, you have to examine the heart, and if you're a psychiatrist, you can't just talk to people about what their brain is doing. You got to look at their brain. And he's become very popular with his SPECT scan technology all over the country, and people pay a lot of money. He thinks there's 5 kinds of ADHD. He thinks this, he thinks that. It's interesting stuff. I just don't think it's reached a level where it's confirmed science, right? I spend my career trying to separate science from non-science from just plain nonsense. And I don't think everything has to be double-blind demonstrated. But I also think we're a very gullible species. We're going to talk on the next Extreme Brains about our instincts and the 7 instincts that make us human and the 3 instincts that got us where we are today but are going to be the death of us if we don't learn how to control them. But coming back to your question, no, we use our entire brain. There is no part of the brain that's held in reserve.
Gotcha.
Now, I'll tell you something really interesting about brain injuries. So I see a lot of babies that are born with paraventricular hemorrhage, bleeds. Often they're premature, sometimes bad delivery. And if a baby has a bleed and damage, for example, in the left front of the brain, where language seems to be working from, they eventually will learn to speak. I was involved in a study. We looked at that. And they learn to speak by using another part of the brain, which is really interesting. And so they're right-brained for language, whereas most of us are left. Even if you're left-handed, we're still left-brained for language. For whatever reason, that part of the brain took that job.
It creates a new path, or
It creates a new path. But it creates a new path at that time. So if you're a baby and a part of your brain is damaged that's supposed to do X, another part of the brain will step up and take over at the point at which the job needs to be assigned, which is, the first, 2 years of life, let's say. When the brain, you're born, it's mostly motor cortex, and different parts of the brain, based on our genetics, are assigned, you're going to do this. This is your job in this person. Okay? So now the baby has a bleed. It's before language is to develop. Another part of the brain either steps up or there's some system to which, who's next? Come on, you get it. Hard to know. If you and I have a hemorrhage in that part of the brain, we lose language.
That's it.
And it doesn't come back. So the brain, I like to say...
so there's a window.
There's a window, and the brain doesn't have a temp agency. There isn't an extra part of the brain just hanging around. It would fit, from an evolutionary basis, there's a lot of good ideas for the brain. But up until just recently, if you had an injury to your brain, you died. So evolution has given us the opportunity for cuts to heal or for other kinds of damage, broken bones to mend. But up until recently, if you injured your brain, especially if it bled, you died. So the brain never really learned how to adapt. And if you look at what happens in brain injuries when you have brain bleeds, the brain releases a protein like a backfire around the damaged area, trying to isolate it. It doesn't try to heal it. It's like a backfire in a forest fire. Just don't do any more damage to me. Just keep away. So there's no temp agency, that just stem cells that hang around. Now, if evolution had worked differently, we'd have a part of our brain that's just stem cells. And like Woody Allen's movie where he anthropomorphized sperm, they were all sitting waiting to go, if you remember that.
Run by Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, right. That's right. There would be a part of your brain that just had, 3-4 billion stem cells on vacation, sitting on the beach, reading a book, hanging around, until some part of your brain, only the brain now, some part of your brain is damaged, and then the alarms would sound, we need 1 billion brain cells, quick, to the left frontal cortex of David Evanoff. And they'd rush up there and get out of the way, and they'd
After
settle
a few
in.
many cocktails.
You're right.
Monday morning.
And they would rush in,
Yeah.
and they would, and they'd convert, and they'd become real brain cells.
Wow.
Right? I mean, that's the whole idea. I have a friend who's got a kind of blood cancer, and he's been going down to Mexico to get stem cells. And it's a reputable clinic down there. Part of the problem up here is stem cells are made not from umbilical cords of human umbilical. They're made from other sources. They say the human umbilical stem cells are really the best. He thinks it's helping him. I have no idea. Again, what we don't know is the code that tells the stem cells what to do. So as you think about it, a stem cell is formed, and something tells it you're going to be a liver, and it goes to a spot and becomes you're going to be a lung, you're going to be, and then the tube starts for the brain, and it grows, and then the brain makes its own stem cells, and the brain.
So those stem cells don't have a code?
No, they're generic. And that's why, and I think what tells us about that, two things it tells us. One, Mario Capecchi, who was a friend who, he has a road named after him up at the U because he got a Nobel Prize. Well, Mario demonstrated that if you take a gene that codes for a fruit fly and you put it in the eye of a mouse, it'll make a mouse eye, not a fruit fly eye, and the other way around. So the cell to make an eye, the stem cell to make an eye, is generic. It'll make whatever kind of eye it's told to make, which I think is
brilliant. Wow.
Which is kind of a really interesting idea, that the stem cells know what to do, but something has to tell them. Now look at us in orangutans. We share, 99-point-something% of our genome is exactly the same as orangutans. But that few percent difference is the code that tells all the other cells what they're supposed to be doing. Right?
Amazing.
I mean, you get great ideas for horror movies, right? For not just the fly. Remember Goldblum in The Fly? He turned into a fly, and you figure out how to change cells, and you take your worst enemy and you shoot your laser gun at him and turn that coding part of his cells into a donkey, and slowly he becomes a donkey, because as the cells move out and replace and grow again, they're donkey cells.
Sure.
And he's
In the 50s, it was the hand. The murderer's hand was placed on, and then that turned the individual into a murderer.
Right. And they're bringing, now they brought that back with Dogman.
Yeah.
You know how kids love Dogman. This to me, we'll have to have a session maybe where we bring three kids in to explain to us, why do you like a cartoon about a grotesque person who loses his head and has a dog screwed onto the top of his head? What is it about? I mean, it's Frankenstein on steroids.
Yep.
That's like, funny. It's really funny, and the creativity of it, because when Shelley wrote Frankenstein, he could have written, and Dr. Wasn't it Dr. Frankenstein?
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Frankenstein, he opened the grave and there was no head, and he looked around and there was a dog, so he put the dog head on Frankenstein. I mean, that would make a whole new movie. A whole new movie.
That's a lot to swallow. So, if I may, let's toss to a break here. Let's listen to a little music by the band Sigmund Freud. And we'll be right back after this.
Call you up, it's just a simple thing. A broken charge, a return to bring. But now I'm lost in a looping tone. It feels like forever, and I'm all alone. Your call is important, please hold tight. But this whole music don't feel right. Hello, can you hear me on the line? Stuck in limbo, losing track of time. Out-of-tone blues echo in my mind. Disconnected, love so hard to find.
Thank you, Sigmund Freud. Welcome back. My brain hurts. Sam, help me.
I've got a selection of liquors,
Well,
That'll do it.
other substances.
Now, is that doctor approved or just friend to friend approved?
It has no approval.
Okay.
There's a disclaimer. I'm not at all responsible what you do with your brain.
Maybe this show should have a disclaimer.
It probably should have a disclaimer. Just because we're saying it doesn't mean it's true. I like that. That should be our log at the end when we sign off.
Mm-hmm.
We should
because
say,
we said it
just
doesn't
because
mean
we
it's
said
true.
it doesn't mean it's true. You're on your own.
I like it.
Right. So we've devoted this first podcast to the brain, right? To this idea of the brain. Why do we sleep? Why do we need to sleep? And let me preface that by telling you that had a professor, and he paid me to take part, help him in a study. What was the study? The study was keep people awake and give them Rorschach ink blots. Now, that's a whole other discussion. Why do ink blots seem to bring out, I'll tell you a quick story in a minute, but bring out the psychopathology in us. And I'm not a big fan of ink blots, but it is interesting. Even just this past week, I had a little boy in my office who's 5.5, family separated. Dad has a history of ADHD and mood disorders. Mom has a history of mood disorders. Single child. He is very aggressive, very impulsive, very hyperactive, off the scale intellectually. I'm asking him information questions, 100 IQ's average, he's 150. And I finally thought, I got to ask him a question he can't answer. And it wasn't on the test. And I asked him, so do you know what gravity is? And I won't use his name. He looked at me and he said, yeah, it's gravity makes things fall back to Earth. Don't you know that? Right? That's how smart he was and how... Anyway, but he kept mentioning blood. And it's an odd phenomena that children who seem to be... Sometimes it's because they've been abused. This child's never been formally abused or neglected, but very aggressive and very violent. His first... When we talk about instincts on the next show, we'll talk about this drive towards aggression. Hit first, ask questions later. And I finally pulled out the ink blots. I don't use them very often. And every ink blot, as soon as there was red, it was blood. And I came to it because one of the tasks we had to do is he has to use a dauber, which is a marker, and he has to on a search grid, he has to daub all of a certain kind of animal or clothing, or I'm looking at how well he scans and focuses, and it was red. And as he daubs it, he looks at it and goes, oh, that's blood. And then he daubs it harder, and I said, well, why are you daubing it so hard? I'm making big blood, like you really got cut. I mean, it was a little... His mother was sitting there, and I think it was distressing for her.
Video games, maybe?
No.
Too young?
No, too young. I mean, look, we don't really understand the mind, and we don't understand the interaction of instincts, which, again, we'll talk about next show, and the mind. But we see children who talk about killing themselves at young ages no one's ever said that to them. They've never seen it. They've not, as far as anybody's aware. So
yeah, and his knowledge of blood, that's
and his
strange
knowledge,
to me.
Right.
And his
well,
knowledge of
he knows
being
everything.
alive.
This little boy knew everything, but and very factual. He knew, he knew all kinds of things. Well, I asked him the name of an ocean, and most kids, if they know, will say Atlantic or Pacific, or he said Arctic.
Wow.
Everything he does is to provoke me. He wants to provoke me to. Don't you know that? But what is the connection? Jung talked about it, a collective unconscious that deep in our genes are evolutionary experiences that our genes carry along. I mean, this is psychoanalytic theory, and when I went from being an animal researcher, a behaviorist, right? I didn't think people would think. I thought everything we did was a consequence of our reinforcement experiences. You're reinforced, you're not reinforced, right? And then I decided, people do think. And I was halfway through graduate school. And so I became a Freudian. And I grew a beard. And in those days, you could bring tobacco into class. And I smoked a pipe. And I'd fill my pipe up.
In class?
In class.
Wow.
In class. And yeah, nobody cared.
I always did it in between.
And this was in class. Well, you were smoking something else.
Different kind of pipe, yeah.
Yeah. And but what was interesting was, so I then became a Freudian, and I had all these explanations for why kids did or didn't do things. The Oedipus complex, where you want to marry your mother and kill your father, and all this other stuff. And then one day I was given a case of a child who didn't want to go to school. And I searched through Freud's. I couldn't find any explanation. There was no Freudian, no story. There was stories about little Hans and horses and all kinds of other stuff that Freud told, but didn't fit. And so I said, this is, he doesn't want to go to school either because he's afraid or because he's had bad experiences, and then my sanity returned. And the psychoanalytic stuff is interesting, but not very applicable to everyday life. I don't think. Now, the psychoanalysts would say we're all dumb and naive and we just don't really understand. But isn't that what we all say about people whose ideas are different from
I was just gonna say
ours?
that,
We'll
yeah.
talk about that next time, about how belief tends to drive irrational behavior in all of us. So let's go back to the original question.
Yeah. Why do we sleep?
Why do we sleep?
Now, I would say some kind of recharge. However, from just personal experience, my brain is very active. My dreams are movies.
Well, and we can talk about the fact that your brain is not shut off when you sleep. It's in a different mode. It's in a sleep mode. And we can discuss how that reduced activity of the brain allows healing for people with brain injuries. Sleep is very important. That's when you heal. Because when you're awake, your brain's turned on. Can't have a half a brain. And people who are very severely brain injured, we put them in a coma, a drug-induced coma.
Oh, right.
And when I see people, I just saw a man last week was in a drug-induced coma because he had a very severe brain injury for a month. And he's now 6 months. He's been out of the hospital only 4 months. And he's 6 months post-accident. And it's unbelievable how well he's doing. He has a little bit of trouble with memory, but he has fewer problems than people I see who have milder to moderate brain injuries where they're not even unconscious.
Wow.
And I think so. There is something to be said for shutting off your brain. I have to tell you the end of the Rorschach story too, and to answer your question about sleep. But I come back to the Woody Allen movie Sleeper, when he wakes up and they undo the silver foil, the tin foil he's wrapped in, and they give him a cigarette and alcohol, and they say, "Oh, we figured out this is actually good for you." Well, someday we may be smart enough, maybe when the lawyers get out of the way, because a lot of brain injuries result in lawsuits, and the defendants don't want to hear about brain injury. But maybe someday, if you have a brain injury at a certain level, they're going to put you in a coma, much like the Bends coming up from the deep, and they're going to know how long to keep you in that coma so your brain can heal to its maximum opportunity. I mean, I think someday that we may well be able to do something like that if we really understand. But it is the case that people with more severe brain injuries, and now we're not talking about people who can't walk or feed themselves, but people who wake up after a coma and seem to be doing reasonably well. And we don't really understand why that is, but maybe it's rest. So what happened to my folks with the ink blots?
Yeah.
Right? So we keep them awake. We don't let them sleep. These are graduates. These are college students. And they can't have any alcohol, but they can have drinks. They can have food. They can watch TV. But they have to stay there. And they're getting paid. Well, about 20 to 24 hours in, they start saying really weird stuff. "Yo, do you know about this or that?" And you keep them awake. By 30 hours in, they start telling you how their uncle is Elvis and he's coming to visit us. And by 36 hours in, Elvis is in the room. He is in the building.
They are Elvis.
They are, yeah, right. And concomitantly, my job was to give them Rorschachs at certain points. And these normal people who had normal mental health, I don't know if you've ever seen the Rorschach ink blots. Sure. A lot of look like butterflies, but they start out. Most people see the big image, a butterfly, a bat, a dancer, and then you point out to them that they can look at little images. There's 3 sizes of image, and some people will see, a bird here or something, a crab over here, and then you can look at little things. Some people see a tiny little thing and say, "Oh, that looks like this," and there are some people who are so concrete they can only see the big. And when you say, you should look at the smaller, they can't. And there are some people who are so obsessed that you can't get to the second ink blot because every little thing has some meaning and they just get overwhelmed. I mean, it's interesting, but I don't think it's diagnostic for any mental health disorder. People say, "Oh, you can find ADHD, you can do this, you can do that." But by 30 hours in, these people are seeing bodies and blood and gore. And it's just interesting how reality begins to distort when we don't sleep. So you're right, sleep in part is to give the brain a chance to rest. Even though the optic system is still generating dreams, But it gives the brain a chance to rest. And so I do think that sleep, in part, evolved for that reason. I also think when you look at the Earth's rotation, the most dangerous time for any species is the dark. Sure. Yes, there are some species who are the other way around. They learn to prey in the dark, sleep in the day, but they don't sleep out in the sunlight. They go into a dark place to sleep. So they're one-offs. But everybody else, it's better off when it gets dark to just find some place to hunker down so some big animal doesn't catch you and eat you. So I think there's probably multiple reasons, right? But let's have fun. So what's the dream that you have? What's the recurring dream?
Well, I really am not aware of recurring dreams. I just have very vivid movie-like dreams. Almost entertainment. I wake up and go, wow, that was fantastic. I got to write that down.
Do you find you have those dreams when you're not so much in a deep sleep, but right before you wake up?
Right before you wake up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we sleep in
In
3
our
cycles, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is the deepest, where you have REM sleep. We haven't talked about that, rapid eye movement. So that kind of sleep is the restorative sleep. So people who sleep who don't have a lot of REM find sleeping not very restorative, right? So you want that. And we sleep in cycles. The first cycle is about 120 minutes, from 1 to 4 and back, which is why you wake up during the night sometimes, unless you've taken something, right? And then you have 90-minute cycles. You wake and sleep. And kids who bedwet, children it's not because they have a small bladder and can't go the night, which is a small group, but the majority who bedwet, it's an immaturity. And as they come out of stage 4 sleep and come down, typically in their first cycle, the brain sends a hormone to the bladder to void. And there's a treatment now, DDAVP. I don't know what the chemical name is. It started as a spray, now it's a pill. And it's a hormone that when the brain releases that hormone, it blocks it. Oh, wow. And the kids don't wet. Now, if the child wets early in the morning before getting up out of bed, that's small bladder. And they're going to have to learn to get up. Well, so now we're on piss. Let's get off of piss and go back to you don't have one recurring dream?
No.
Do you have a recurring theme in your dream?
Yes.
Okay, what's the recurring theme? Isn't that
Showbiz.
interesting?
It's always I'm back on tour with Jesus Christ Superstar, or I'm playing your show at the Grand, or it's always showbiz.
And is there some potential challenge or problem that dresses up in a different way? What is it?
It's getting to the opening downbeat. It's that moment of this has got to happen now, and it's not going to happen. And what is preventing me from getting there?
James, your dream?
I had a dream last night. Well, this is interesting. Our smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector, was out of battery, and it starts to beep. I was having a dream of that beep, and I instantly, in my dream, knew, I need to change the battery. Sounds like. And then my son came in the room and woke me up and said, hey, I think so just the beeping made me dream about a smoke detector running out of batteries.
But I wonder if that was a dream or you were just in a semi-conscious state.
That's a good
And I think
question.
there's a state of between being awake and being asleep.
It was pretty vivid, but...
But do you have a recurring theme in your dreams?
I have had before. Nothing I could probably speak of.
So I'll tell you
but it's
mine.
happened.
So I'll tell you mine because I think there are some underlying phenomena, and I wonder how much of it is cultural. But so in my reoccurring dream, I'm trying to get somewhere, and there's always something keeping me. And it's always when I'm traveling, because you guys know I've traveled and lectured around the world for the last 40 years. I'm a 4 million flyer on Delta. I get on the plane in Salt Lake and they say, hello, Sam. So they know me. And so it's a matter of getting to places, getting to the gate for the plane, finding the hotel room in the hotel, getting to the presentation room where I'm supposed to present. It's always something that's I'm wandering around, and people are telling me go here or go there. It's like being in New York trying to get directions. Everybody tells you go in a different way because they don't know, but they're going to tell you. That's my dream. I need to make something happen, and it's not happening.
Right.
And I think so. I'm not big on dream analysis. This idea, you had a dog and a kitten in your dream. Well, it means this. No, but these underlying themes in our lives, because we spend our whole day trying to be where we're supposed to be, when we're supposed to be, do what we're supposed to do, when we're supposed to do it. Watch out for all the rules that tell us how to live our lives, because otherwise we'd be out of control. We'll come to that next time. And I do think there's that underlying theme is played out in our dreams, and I do think it's an indication of the kind of the stress we live under.
Our typical anxieties.
Right.
Yeah.
And
you described that's exactly.
Right.
I can't get to the curtain because my costume is missing.
Right. And the people around me are not very helpful. They're all offering guidance, but they're not very helpful. Mm-hmm. And I'm wandering around, and I cannot tell you. And I've had this recurring dream 30 years, and it doesn't, not every night, maybe once in a couple of weeks, but I can tell you that not in one of those dreams have I ever reached the goal.
Yeah.
I just don't reach the goal, right? So it's just
you never going to run fast.
You're never going to get there. It's like God, telling Moses, you can go right up to the river Jordan, but you'll never set foot in the Holy Land because you beat that goddamn rock. I mean, what? God, give me a break. Look at this guy. Look what he's done for you, and you're not going to let him into the Holy Land because he beat on a rock. I mean, this. Anyway, we can talk about.
We'll go there.
We can talk about when we talked about the Bible. The one big lesson in the Bible is think before you act. Don't be impulsive, right? And the next lesson is practice forgiveness. To Joseph's brothers come to Egypt, he forgives them. Lot takes his wife and brings it to the kitchen of the new place and probably chunks off a bit of her every time he needs something in his food. But something good, a little salt, but something, something maybe good happens, after it.
Wow.
Yeah. So maybe dreams have a place.
Dreaming, evolutionary. Animals dream, don't they? Doesn't it seem like they do?
Seems like they're dreaming, You watch your dogs, something's going on, and right. But again, does it serve a purpose? Not it tells the dream analyzer to what's wrong with you.
Right.
But does it really serve any real purpose? And I don't have any idea. Why does this dream that you and I bet a lot of other listeners, if you have the same dreams, write us. You can write into extremebrains@samgoldstein.com. extremebrains@samgoldstein.com, and we'll read your comments or answer your comments. But I bet most people have that kind of a dream of an unfulfilled goal.
Yeah.
That we as a human species, we're never fulfilled. Till the day we die, there's always something, that we haven't accomplished or that we haven't done.
Always out of reach.
Always out of reach. But it's an interesting thing about dreaming. What else do you do when you sleep? Sometimes, I shouldn't admit this, but sometimes when I sleep, suddenly I'm sleeping and I'm thinking, I need to go. And sometimes I kind of have a dream that I am going, and I wake up and I think, oh God, did I wet the bed?
Right, sure.
And I didn't. I didn't. And then I get up and I go, right?
You have a dream that you're at the toilet. And
I'm dreaming. I'm really at the toilet, and I'm thinking, oh no, did I? No, but I didn't. So there, God has mercy. I can dream about almost peeing, but not peeing. The same theme, right?
Thank God. And Sherry thanks you.
Yeah, it's the same. That's my wife, since you guys don't know. That's right.
Wow. Well, we could take another little break here and enjoy some more music from the band Sigmund Freud.
Yeah, I think we should take a break, and I think our last segment, maybe we should focus on why we only have one brain, and again, why it might be better if we had a dog's brain.
I'd love to
And
know.
since we don't, what should we do about it?
Okay, we'll be right back.
Turn around and I'll be there. Every breath of open air when shadows fall and hope seems thin, I'll be the light that draws you in. I'll be there, I'll be there, I'll be there, I'll be there. When silence wraps the world in night, our dreams slip out of sight. Just call my name, feel my care, turn around and I'll be there, I'll be there, I'll be there, I'll be there. Every tear, every smile, across each step, across each mile. No matter where, no matter when, by your side again and again.
Welcome back, and thank you, band Sigmund Freud.
And for those of you that don't know, that's spelled B-A-N-N-E-D.
Like
Band Sigmund Freud.
The band.
So,
If you're not a fan, by the way, check us out. And I say us because the three of us are a part of this. We're humbly a part. Check us out on YouTube and Spotify. Are we there?
not yet.
Not yet.
Yes,
well, we are there on
yeah.
2 albums. We have 2 albums there.
Oh, yeah, the
Spotify,
previous
Apple
album.
The
Music.
first one is called, let's see, the first one is Songs for My Collective Unconscious. And the second one is called Mama's Kitchen Table. And we can all remember poignantly being outside playing, and Mom calls you in for lunch or dinner, and your goal is to eat as quickly as you can, answer whatever questions you're asked, and get the hell out of there to go back to doing what
Get
you were
back out to the
doing.
fun.
But years later, when Mom has passed away, and you reflect on, maybe I should have stayed a little longer at that kitchen table. And Michael Schoenfeld, who was part of the band and no longer is, but Michael wrote that song. It was my idea, and he wrote a wonderful melody to it of, I wish I had stayed just a little bit longer at the table, but I was in too much of a hurry. We're always in a hurry to get somewhere, right? So this last segment is titled, Maybe We Would Be Better Off If We Had a Dog Brain. So I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Tell me the one special thing you think your brain is able to do that enriches your life.
Write songs.
Music.
Yeah.
Okay.
Art.
And I argue that we danced and sang before we could read and write. Mm-hmm. We drew pictures on the wall before we had letters to write. And it's ironic that in the schools, the things we want to cut are the things we think are unimportant, like music and art. We ought to cut reading and math and spelling because they're becoming less and less important. You don't need them.
Right.
What you need is to know how to think critically. My hope was that when COVID came, we would shut the schools. Just stay home, because kids are far worse off for what we did to them in COVID. We said, screens aren't good, but it's okay to sit 6 more hours in front of screens to do your schoolwork. You're right. I would have hoped we would have shut the schools, and I have a project called Inside Out Schools, and maybe one podcast we'll devote to talking about schools. And I believe that we have to begin thinking about preparing children for their adult lives, basically nurturing their brains, developing both their critical thinking and their knowledge in such a way that they'll be able to thrive and not just survive 50 years from now. And I use the term inside-out schools, where I see teachers not as fonts of knowledge, just like a fountain standing in front of the room, but as an engagement coach. And the teacher's job is to get kids engaged in the process of learning, and that motivation comes from the child's experience with whatever it is you're trying to help them understand and learn, and not because someone says, I'm going to give you an A, or you won't get your driver's license, or whatever the case may be. So one show, we're going to talk about schools, and I'll tell you, just so you know, I'm the cynic on that panel, because I think schools were started in the mid-1800s in the United States to keep kids out of the workforce. And I don't really care what
They were
anybody
taking
else
your job.
says. Yeah, because they'll take your job. A 9-year-old can work in the mines for next to nothing. And nobody cared about children's rights or welfare. You know, the first welfare agency in this country wasn't for kids, it was for dogs. The ASPCA was founded before any organization to protect children. And I'm proud to say that in Utah, we have the Children's Service Society. I sat on their board for many years. They're the oldest continuous service for children, started by a group of Mormon women in the late 1800s to help take indigent children off the street.
Wow.
Believe it or not. And it's continued on in lots of different roles, right through wars, right through bad times, and it continues to this day here in Salt Lake City. And they do wonderful things, from foster care and adoption to parent training and preschool services. And but putting that aside, coming back to the issue of schools. And so if you're going to mandate you got to go to school so you're not in the workforce, what should we teach you? We're not going to teach you anything useful, because then you'll come out of school and you'll be more functional than the people whose jobs you're trying to
You
steal.
take our jobs again.
Right. So we're going to just teach you to read and write. You don't really need that to work. And eventually, how long should we keep you in school, and et cetera. And you can see now the monstrosity that education and higher education and higher education, which is graduate school, has become. And I'm not anti-education. I just think that we need to step back and understand that if we want to change a phenomena, we have to go back to where it started and work our way through it to understand how we got here and where we want us to go. Right? So, okay, so music and art. Mm-hmm. And you?
Dave took mine. I'll maybe open it up bigger and just say creativity as a whole. Even just being a homeowner, learning how to fix things in my house, so I don't have to pay somebody.
You took
to
somebody's
do it.
job.
Yeah, I took somebody's job.
So,
education again.
Yeah,
right.
education.
So two main operations: make something from nothing, and that's what I love about my split vocations.
Yeah.
Is that in the one hand, if I say something, people want to see 3 references and 4 studies.
Right.
And on the other hand, on the other side of my brain, when I say something, people say, wow, that's really creative. Who would have thought of, an intelligence test for people 100,000 years ago? Wow, nobody. Right. Isn't it? It's just so interesting how we bifurcate these two things our brain does, which is to acquire knowledge and then apply it. And along the way, create something new from nothing, or from what other people... Inspiration, right? And I don't use the word intelligence by itself anymore. In our model, maybe we'll have a show about that, what the brain really does, how it works. I think the brain does 4 primary things. It attends to detail, it thinks critically, it forms and follows plans, and it sequences. Everything in the universe is a sequence. And the term I use for intelligence is simultaneous intelligence. And the word simultaneous, I'll put you guys on the spot here, means seeing something at the same time, seeing all the parts at the same time. So if I say to you, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, David, what comes next?
12.
It's a simple sequence. Either one of you can chime in here. What comes next? 1, 3, 6, 10, 15. Feel free to write it down. 1, 3,
Home audience,
6,
join us.
10, 15. We have a pregnant pause here.
Wow. This is valuable time.
Well, take a guess, even if you're wrong. 1, 3, 6, 10?
21.
Correct. And what you realized was that the gap between every pair of numbers was increasing by 1.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't mean you're Einstein. It doesn't. I don't know. It's not part of a test. But it demonstrates.
I saw the pattern.
Right. Seeing patterns, which is what intelligence was about 100,000 years ago. Seeing patterns in one form of stimulus or another, right? So here's another one. If I give you 10 facts about an animal and you pick 3, there is a chance the 3 you pick will match the animal you choose, may not match the others. Right? Mm-hmm. And so if I say to a child, tell me an animal with big ears, he might give me a lot of animals. If I say, tell me an animal with big ears and a long trunk, I had a kid the other day tell me anteater. And we had to go look at images. Their ears weren't that big, but they had a big, long nose, right? And he said, that's a trunk. I said, okay, I think it's a nose. But
I'll give it to you.
But as I'm giving you more facts, so intelligence is about using all the pieces of information at your disposal and solving patterns by solving solutions with patterns. And creativity is taking a piece of information other people haven't thought of or don't have and putting it in with these pieces. You're going to come up with something novel or new, right? Mm-hmm. And so even there you see the blend between what we were just talking about, creating something out of nothing. But it's not out of nothing. It's everything you know and taking something else and making something new from it. It's not as if every time you write a song, you start from zero.
Right.
You have your experiences of music to build upon. And the same thing when you learn to do something, acquiring knowledge, right? The brain, that's what the brain does, is it acquires knowledge by using abilities, memory, sequencing, attention, to acquire that knowledge. And then you use both your acquired knowledge and your abilities to efficiently solve problems in everyday life. It's skill, right? And all kinds of things affect skill. So you see some people who are great athletes, have good ability and good knowledge. We had a center on our basketball team who, unfortunately, I don't know what happened to him, but he was a real. I don't know where he went, but he had mental health problems, and even though he had great ability and great acquired knowledge to play basketball, he wasn't skillful because he couldn't manage his life. Remember him?
Are you talking?
He was a center.
Jazz? Or?
Yeah, Jazz.
Yeah.
He was a center, and we took a chance on him. We drafted him. He was a very good player, but his mental health was such that he couldn't function, right? And then you see other people who just have average abilities and average knowledge, but they're very efficient, very skillful, work very hard. Those are the kids that get 4 O's on their GPA, and then they take their college entrance exam and they do just average. And people go, I don't get it. Well, because that ACT or that college entrance exam wasn't just spit out all the factual information you've learned. It was do something creative with it, solve problems with it, and that's unevenly distributed in the population. Some of us are good at it, some not. I just posted, I do a blog on Psychology Today, and the one I just posted is titled Creativity as the New Intelligence. If you go to Psychology Today and look at their blogs, you'll see my blog. People seem to like it. And the idea is that in the future, it's not going to be enough to take in information and spit it out. It's not going to be enough to take in information. Even if you reorganize it and spit it out, you're going to have to find sources of information other people aren't thinking of. And that really the future of critical thinking is not just problem solving, but problem solving in a creative way. So I would add to your description of making something out of nothing, and your description of acquiring knowledge and storing it away for when you need it, right? I would add a third component to that, which I might call maybe efficiency, not just being Jim Morrison or Jimi Hendrix, and not just being that basketball player. What was his last name? Was with a B. Barney?
Boozer?
No, it wasn't Boozer. Boozer.
Forward.
Boozer now. Boozer, I saw Boozer the other day. Not in person, but Boozer now sells real estate in Miami. And so they have a show, realtors in Miami are $1 million listings.
Boozing it up in
Florida. And she took him to lunch. I guess he wants to get in with their group, but he's not a woman and he doesn't wear stiletto heels. So, but she took him to lunch, and there was Boozer all dressed up. He now sells. He's now selling real estate, right?
That's really interesting.
I think. So it wasn't Boozer, but I don't remember who the kid was. No, it wasn't Ostertag. I don't know what Ostertag is doing now. Ostertag, God, I used to sit. We had tickets for the Jazz, and I was in the 4th row next to Nate Morgan and Nate has Morgan's Jewelry right behind the jazz basket on the bench side. So we were within earshot of what Jerry Sloan was saying to people. And I used to reach over to my son and hold his hands over his ears because he would curse at Ostertag.
Oh,
And finally Ostertag had enough of him. And some show we can talk about changing minds, right? Because I can't change your physical brain. I can change your mind, right? And look at the ways we try. So the Jerry Sloan ways, let me yell and scream and curse at you. Mm-hmm. There are other ways of let me hold your hand and coddle you. There may be a lot of ways that we go about trying to kind of change people's minds or their mindset. But before we run out of steam here...
Well, yeah. What about the dog brain? Are we going to be better off?
Well, you tell me.
I would say
go through...
definitively no.
Okay, all right. Let's assume the dog brain does have human qualities. So the dog brain can talk.
Oh, okay.
The dog brain can feel basic emotion. The dog brain, my wife squares, one of our dogs talks to her, bark once, wants this, bark twice, wants that, whatever the case may be. Bark a certain way, I don't know. But let's assume the dog brain operates on a very simple stimulus response model. Mm-hmm. The dog brain's not going to rob or steal, but if there's opportunity, they might. But pretty simple, basic human qualities. But not that frontal lobe that leads to all the trouble that we get into.
So the dog brain is not going to think of a way to lie.
Correct. The dog brain is going to be kind of like Dog Man on TV.
Yeah.
The dog brain's not going to do any of that kind of stuff. And maybe we would be better off.
As a society? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it would do to theater and movies and TV.
Yeah.
Because nobody could act. Well, you want me to play Superman? Well, there's no such thing as Superman. How am I supposed to play something that there isn't anything else? Well, just pretend you could fly, and then we'll do the CG and it'll make you fly. But I'm not really flying. How could that be?
Right.
Music might be boring.
And who wrote it down? Who?
Let me leave you. Again, we don't have a high point summary of what we've talked about today. Maybe we should. Here are the 5 things you need to remember. So as we edit this together, David will take it and voice over. Here are the 5 things you need to remember from today's show. But let me leave you with an idea we haven't talked about, which is that there really isn't anything bad or not good that the brain does or experiences. Sometimes it's just too much of a good thing. And worry, people who worry a lot, it pays to worry a little. If you don't worry a little, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
It pays in game theory to be a little selfish and not always share with everybody, but just share enough.
Michael Jordan.
If you share too much, they're going to get you. If you don't share enough, they're going to get you. When I see kids with autism, which today is basically a social learning problem. They have normal intelligence. They can't take other people's perspective. They can't see the world through anybody else's eyes. They don't know what other people are thinking or feeling. They don't get it. Or kids with anxiety who see danger where there's, they're like the robot in Lost in Space. Danger, Will Robinson. Well, the original robot, not the remake
not
one.
Not the Netflix one.
Because the Netflix one was Danger, Will Robinson. He didn't look like he was out of control at all. He flashing light. And that we should talk about that robot. That was an interesting robot, how they arrived at that.
Evolution of...
At that robot, that particular robot. And how shitty that Lost in Space series actually was. And people liked it, but I just thought it was
At
dumb.
the time.
I just thought it was...
Great theme song, though.
Great theme song.
John Williams.
And very creative robots at the end there. They have all these creative robots and very creative. But coming back to my point, most of the children I see with mental health issues, it's too much of something. Too rigid in how you think. Too anxious in how you look at the environment. Too helpless or hopeless. You don't want to believe you can fly. You have to have a realistic understanding of what you can do. But being too hopeless or helpless about what you can do. Again, we're not talking about learning disabilities. There, for 90% of kids, it's language-based limitation. Language is a new phenomena in our species. We only started speaking not very long ago. And so it's not unexpected that 80 to 90% of the kids in special education have language-based reading disabilities, not visually based. We've been using our visual skills forever. So there's been a chance for evolution to maybe select out those who aren't as functional at it, right? And that's what I tell the kids and the families that I see is you or your child has too much of a good thing. It's a very different mindset than most mental health professionals who start out by asking parents, so tell me what's wrong with your kid. Tell me what problem.
Instead, you say, tell me what's right about your kid.
I say, tell me what's right. And when they say, well, okay, here's what's right, but he's afraid of everything. He worries about everything. I say, well, tell me one thing he doesn't worry about. And they can always tell you something. And I say, well, why doesn't he worry about that? We don't know. And then when you ask the kid, why don't you worry about this? I don't know. I'm not afraid of that. And I'll say, but I know a kid who's afraid of that, but he's not afraid of what you're afraid of. It's too much of a good thing, and it's learning how to adjust what your body is saying. At some point, we should do a show on what is mental illness really, because it's again, it's an inflation of the very qualities that kept us alive. Paid to worry, paid to feel a little helpless. It paid to be a little aggressive. It paid to be a little impulsive. And I'll leave you with this story I used to tell until it got me into trouble. Eventually, I get into trouble. And at the end of my conferences, because I wrote one of the first textbooks on ADHD, and my theory originally, the first book out was, it's a disease, a disorder, and kids can't pay attention. And Michael and I looked at the animal research, and our book was about impulse control. And that ADHD is the result of an immaturity in impulse control. And if the task is interesting, these kids can pay attention. But if it's boring and repetitive and effortful and doesn't have an immediate payoff, they lack the self-discipline to pay attention. We've talked about that on my TikTok. If you don't know, I have a TikTok called @CommonSenseScience. And I talk about stuff that people say that are stupid and aren't accurate or aren't right. And I try and offer my opinion, and some people listen and some people don't. That's both the advantages and disadvantages of our society, of who we are as a species. So I used to tell a story at the end of my conference with professionals on these problems from ADHD because they're higher incidence of substance abuse, higher incidence of delinquency, higher incidence of leaving school early. Not good. Not good. They don't become ancient hunters on a great battlefield, as some people would profess. And I'd say, so consider who are the people who emigrated from Europe and that part of the world to the New World and got on rickety boats, didn't know where they were going, when they would get there, what they would find. Come on, don't you want to go? Nope, you go. I'm not going. So people who were a little more impulsive, a little more willing to take risk, got on those boats. A lot of them sank in the middle of the ocean. Then they get to the East Coast and they establish a culture. And then what happens? Washington has to cross the Delaware. What is he doing in that famous picture? Standing up. George, sit down. He's impulsive. It's lucky he didn't fall in the water and drown, or we'd be still part of England today, right? And finally, we have some organized society on the East Coast of the United States. And again, some people, for religious reasons, for whatever reasons, get in these rickety wagons and head where? They don't know. What's over there? They don't know. And off they go. Again, the risk takers. I'm going to stay here. It's okay. Well, maybe there's something better than, no, you go. And they get to California. And they hit an ocean. Which is why all the crazies ended up in California. It's all the risk takers. Really? And, why didn't they get in boats and go to Hawaii? But they didn't. I was in Bellingham, Washington, about 20 years ago lecturing. And they came up to me during a break and said, we have a very high incidence of diagnosis of ADHD in our middle and high schoolers, like 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6. And I said, wow, that's a lot. You think they're overdiagnosing? And without batting an eyelash, this person looked at me and said, well, you have to understand that 30% of the population of Bellingham emigrated from California. Again, the risk takers.
There you go.
So what I would say to parents is the next time your child is going up the down escalator and everybody's looking, you can stop and say, if it wasn't for my kid, your kid would be sitting in a cave somewhere trying to figure out how to make a fire. Because my kid went out to look. Remember that movie, Quest for Fire? Did you ever see?
Sure.
Right. 3 cave-era guys with ADHD. Have you seen Quest for Fire?
No, I don't think.
Oh, go home and watch it tonight. It's
Classic.
Ray Don Chong is in it. There's no dialogue.
Nope.
No dialogue.
Oh, no dialogue.
No dialogue.
All cave people.
3 cave people. And this cave group lives inland, and they know how to keep fire but not make fire. So it's a big deal. Keep the fire going. And it just so happens the lottery that night, the 3 guys who are given the job of watching all have ADHD, and the fire goes out. They fall asleep. So now the chief sends them, go find fire or we're screwed. And they wander around. They're stuck up a tree by some lions, and they wander around. And they finally find a group of people who live on the ocean, on the coast. And they're more advanced. And they teach them how to have sex in different positions.
Yeah,
that's my favorite part.
Ray Don Chong.
But they teach them to make fire. And they give them a little flint and little kindling, and they show them how you rub this fire. And these 3 guys, I don't know how they found their way back, but they find their way back. Where's the fire? The chief goes, no fire. He's about to kill them. And they take out this little pack, and they open it up, and they do this, fire. And that one scene is so priceless because everybody in the tribe is like, oh my God. Oh, and they grab the chief and they throw him off a cliff, and they make these 3 guys the leaders. Which tells us that there was a time in our history when impulsivity paid off. And if you took a risk and killed a woolly mammoth and everybody ate, you were venerated, and you got the best women. And even if you died 3 months later, it didn't matter. They were carrying your children. There's some reason why, impulsive qualities may have had some traits that passed along, to today. Maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, it's an interesting brain that we have, and an interesting world we've created. We should all leave with one final thought. What's your final thought, David?
Well, I was going to say, if you want to explore this with us, because that's what I'm doing. I enjoy being here just to learn more. And if you out there enjoy learning more about the brain and about why we do what we do, join us every week or when we sign on and send us some questions, and we will do our best to help enlighten you as well, or give you food for thought.
I would say I love my dog's brain. I really do. I wouldn't want to have it, but I'm glad he has it.
Yeah,
Well
that's
said.
very, very well said. And I'll leave you with one additional thought. What I think is the irony of the chaos in which our universe operates. I think, who knows where the universe ends? I don't really understand what this is all about. But I think it operates on random chaos theory. And I think so many variables had to fall into place to create the primordial sludge from which the first organism crawled out 6 billion years ago. And although I may have my detractors, and there are probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of solar systems, I don't think it's happened anyplace else. I think this is the only place that it's happened. And
Really?
I do. I think, again, understanding the size of the universe. Well, first, what are the chances of the aliens? I love the recent stuff about aliens flying around. What are the chances of that? It would be like finding a red grain of sand on the beach in Coney Island. One red. I don't think, if there are other living species, the chances we find each other are like finding one grain of sand among an infinite number. But even more so, I don't think this series of events over 8 billion years happened to any other
Again.
place. We had dinosaurs for millions of years, and nothing changed. And then along comes a meteorite, kills the dinosaurs, and the warm-blooded animals survive, and here we are. I mean, that's really what happened. And we'd still be the dinosaurs. We wouldn't be here had that not happened. And regardless of how you look at evolution. So I think it would be a shame if we screwed it up and that was the end of us. Although I don't think the cockroaches and the sharks will live forever, but it would really be a shame if we don't get our act together and take advantage of what the brain has to teach us and how to use the brain for a less chaotic and maybe a happier world, and we'll see.
Hear, hear.
In the short time that we're given.
In the short time that we're given. But I have a 28-year plan, so I have things to do till I turn 100. So
It's great.
I'm extending my time.
You will.
Yeah, knowing you will.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Anyway, see you on the next podcast, everyone.
And if you listen to their stories,
Just because we said it doesn't mean it's true. You're on your own.